It's just where they're filling in the sort of bound with the boundary. It's the site boundary.
If we can get into, so go to existing.
That's the one, isn't it? There you go on. So they're filling in that bit on the left, the left-hand drawing, the existing elevations, 100 below, that drawing below. So it's that one there, look. So it's that bit on the left. That's what they're filling in to make what is the orange shape. So that's the boundary.
Yeah.
And that's what they're filling in. And it's that in terms of, you fill that in, it's very close to that boundary. That's
Right. Site or location plan. Yeah, just location plan. So, yeah, as you can see with the dark shaded area.
That's the new bit.
The new bit. And it will be very close to what is quite a large property there.
That was the only observation in terms of boundary, building on a boundary. Have they got to keep it at a certain distance away from the boundary, as opposed to building onto the boundary?
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those issues, isn't it? Because certainly gaining access to it, particularly if you pipe at that top end, might be a bit of a challenge.
Doesn't seem to be a rule anymore. There used to be I don't know whether
Yeah,
it's
like,
only
it was
type of
only,
stone
it
or
just stood out, it just
you
stood
had to be able
out.
to get your fire engine down the side. That's,
We wouldn't get a fire engine down much.
you wouldn't get a bicycle down.
That
That's-
one, yeah.
That was my main push about boundary, that was all, building up to, right up to the boundary. That was it.
So we could say something like, no objection, provided that the new construction is not too close to the boundary with with number 2. Is it number 2? No, 2A, I think it was.
C2A is pretty much up to the boundary, isn't it?
Because they're also, because they're going to fill the other
You
side as
know,
well.
so they can't really argue if the people on the other side do it.
They're not going to have a lot of room if they're doing the other side as well.
Yeah, I mean, it does look as if the thing will effectively.
It looked like a terrace.
Well, I mean, you could then say, well, he does what he's proposed amount to some sort of overdevelopment?
Yeah.
Because there is then no, I think you'd have to go through the property to access the back.
But he's putting his drains in down the side, so there must be enough width to create a footway. Because at the
Doesn't
moment,
look like
garage,
it,
got
does
Doesn't
driveway,
look like it.
he's got a garage and he's got currently a garage on that side, isn't he?
Hmm.
So that was my only observation, building that's close up to the, because the garage is going to be at the front, isn't it? Conscious of the,
Well, if we say, we could say no objection,
to take due cognizance of the,
uh,
how close it is
but
to the
we-
boundary
but
on
we-
that side.
yeah, we are sort of cognizant of the fact that it appears to mean that the property is pretty much up against boundaries on both sides,
Yeah,
or something,
Yeah.
just some comment like that.
I think so.
Yes, because it's about impeding access to the back of the property
Yes,
completely, isn't it?
it seems to. The next one, I have to say, baffled me. Back in July, there was a planning application in relation to the bookshop. And it was to do with the replacement of works to the windows on the first and second floors.
Oh.
And there was an objection at the time from the Ancient Monuments Society. And their concern basically was, if it's repairable, it should be
I
repaired
remember it.
rather than replaced. And it's come back. It's a shambles on the portal. because I couldn't actually work out what they were now doing. But my assumption is that they're trying to meet the concerns of the Ancient Monuments Society. And for what it's worth, Historic England didn't have an issue with it. When we responded to the original thing, we said there were no objections subject to the views of the Conservation Officer and the Ancient Monuments Society. My guess is that we should respond in precisely the same way.
Yes, the
Because
situation.
A, it's consistent,
Yeah.
and B, if the Ancient Monuments Society is now happy, fine. And if they're still not happy, well, let them slug it out with the Conservation Officer.
Job done.
So I think the response is exactly the same as the previous one. I think it would actually help the next one if we can get it up again. Actually, there's not much, but
What's this one there?
it's significant. This is the Old Town Hall.
Okay.
Fine and Country estate agents want to put signage on it.
What's the number of the application? Sorry.
The number of the application is 01582 ADV.
Town Country. Didn't Savills used to be in there?
Yeah,
A while ago, yeah.
Yeah.
some time ago.
Are they going upstairs then again?
It's not, they're not there now.
Who?
Savills aren't.
No, I know they're not, but it was the hairdresser, bar hairdressers.
Well, then it was, the,
So, if you just go to that one first and then that one, I think, or maybe the other one. Yeah, so that's what we want to put up.
Yeah, that's part of their.
That's going to be a hanging sign.
Yeah.
And those ones are wording applied directly to the building. So as it says, there would be kind of fixings from here into the wall.
but, excuse me, they can't do that because it's a listed building.
You're anticipating me.
Oh, Val's on it
You are on
tonight.
it
I can tell.
Right, okay, if you come out and then go to those two. Doesn't matter which one
Yeah,
you
okay,
do it in,
they've
because
done
actually,
some photographs,
in many
haven't they?
respects, right.
They've done some photographs for that.
They have actually mocked it up.
Yeah.
That is quite bad drawing.
Let's use the photographs.
Use
They're
the
actually better.
photographs.
Yeah, come out of it. Yeah, do that and then. Let's have that. Okay. So there it is. And there's actually going to be the hanging sign there.
I prefer that.
Now, as Councillor Chester has pointed out, this is a listed building. Arguably one of the most significant listed buildings in the entire town because of its prominence. And I might be being an idiot, but there is no application for listed building consent. This is an advertising control application. And my view is it ought to fail. Now, this is quite interesting because the town council has its electronic notice board, in fact, and so on, just there, and you can see how it looks.
You can see the
It's
hanging
not-
sign there.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's not the visuals that worry me.
It's the holes in the stone.
It's actually the impact on the building. So my suggestion would be that we say, this is a listed building, and we have concerns about fixing lettering onto it by in effect drilling a series of holes, at least one per letter,
Minimum.
to put it up. Subject to any contrary view that the Conservation Officer might have. Or we can even say, not subject to the view of the Conservation Officer. In other words, we're worried about it regardless of the view of the Conservation Officer.
The previous owners, the ones after Savills, who never moved in,
Right.
I caught them putting these kind of letters up round the other
I
side.
remember.
And I told them that it was, not allowed. And they were drilling holes in the stone. And they were very concerned, actually. And I sent them to the planning people. who immediately said, no, you can't do it. You're only allowed to do it, any kind of drilling, if it's in to the mortar that's between.
Between
Can't
stone.
drill into the stone.
What did Shaman and Quinny do next door?
Sorry, well, some people don't get the planning, they just go ahead and do it.
Yeah, well, so
Because
Shaman
actually,
and
if you look at, there are some photographs where you can see the Shaman Quinny sign. Actually, I think if you go to the other elevation, you do the photograph of the south elevation, because that's the east.
Shamwell and Quinny disobeyed the.
Oh yeah, they've got theirs.
They
Big
applied
black
for planning though, didn't they? They did apply for planning in the end.
You've not to put the metal signs.
Photos, the bottom of one photo is.
Yeah.
Bottom of what?
Second of one, it says
I mean, I
photo,
don't- we
visual
wouldn't
showing
have any
south
problem with
elevation,
that.
white.
Maybe that's the one.
This one.
No, the bottom,
No,
second
actually,
of
sorry,
one,
it's,
that one.
yes, it's
Okay.
photos.
One below it. The one below that one.
This one.
That's one,
Yes,
yes.
that's it. So there you can see Shaman Quinny on the left hand side. And of course, Fine Country will argue
That it's already a precedent.
that it's
Depends
already
whether-
been done.
Yes.
However, it seems to me that, just because Fred steals from Tesco doesn't necessarily mean that Bill should be allowed to do it.
Exactly.
It's still a crime.
Yeah.
And if we're not happy with them doing it, we should say so. Ultimately, it's not our call. I would think the Conservation Officer will have a view, and let's see what ends up happening. And I dare say we could make the observation on here that, because I don't know exactly how those lettering for Shaman Quinny are fixed. But perhaps we should just say that in looking at this application, they might want to look at what's already been done to the building in case it's.
Well, is that a planning enforcement issue then?
Yeah,
It is,
It is.
very much.
So if Shaman and Quinny haven't complied with the rules, then that means.
exactly.
Yeah.
So in other words, almost as an aside
Yeah.
to our comment on this application, we ask whether or not there is an enforcement issue in relation to what's already there
Yeah.
with what Shaman Quinny had done.
And at least we'll get consistency in terms of
Yeah.
them applying a planning application for it, and that would solve them probably not complying with what they should do, because I'm assuming they didn't ask for that. I know it's not part of
The
the
thing
application.
is, I don't
They didn't
remember
ask.
that coming before
No,
us.
they didn't, they just appeared.
And I don't think we
I'm
picked up
pretty
the
sure we
fuss.
saw some visuals for it. I'll have to have
Is
a
it?
look.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
pretty sure we saw some visuals for it.
So it might have gone through a planning.
I would
process.
have been saying the same thing if I
Yeah,
had seen.
I mean,
Well, it was.
you may well be
it was
right, I don't remember it, but it may be.
The other thing as well is they put the lettering right over the current alarm box. That means that's more drilling because they've got to move the alarm.
Yeah. I mean, the stone is full of holes.
Yeah, so, if we make those comments useful.
We don't object to the hanging sign, do we?
No, the hanging sign probably isn't a problem, it's relatively discreet.
And we
It's
do quite like them.
something, and it's a hanging, non-illuminated sign, it's in keeping, so, yes, it's the ones applied directly to the wall, that are essentially flush with the wall, that are the issue. So that is effectively an objection. Right, on to the lawn cottage. There are certain properties that just seem to keep coming back and back, and lawn cottage is one of them. You may recall that it wasn't that long ago that there was an application for change of use on this buildings. And they wanted to turn it into what they were sort of describing as an upmarket B&B. And our main concern wasn't actually with what they were going to do to the building, because it was an application for change of use. Our problem with that was the parking, because there wasn't enough. And that application was subsequently withdrawn. And now an application's come in, and it's clear that this is with a view to it being residential. In other words, it's current use. So it's not change of use as before. my own notes on it are quite extensive. There's a very good design and access statement by Mark Benz of Croft Associates with it. And the way it's kind of sold, if I put the word in inverted commas, is that this is tidying up the property. And there's a series of photographs at the end, and of course they've been taken in such a way as to illustrate why it needs tidying up. But the interesting thing is that there used to be a link between Lawn House and Lawn Cottage, Lawn House being listed. And that link was then kind of closed up. And then, this is quite instructive actually, we just leave that up for a minute. So we're going to restore the link. But the end result is that the combined property, which will be a single property, will have 2 separate kitchen areas. Nothing wrong with that. But a total of 7 bedrooms, and plus, on the second floor, in addition to a bedroom with an ensuite, which is described as a study and which is described as a games room, which of course could equally easily be bedrooms. So in theory, you've got a property that could have 9 bedrooms. This is off the scale in terms of the Highways Authority's parking standards document, because I haven't actually gone into the source material, but we've never actually had to consider a private house with even 7 bedrooms, let alone 9, and the number of car parking spaces you would need. But the problem they've got, can we just try and put it up a bit? Yeah, that's it. So the plan is to slightly widen this entrance, put a nice wrought iron gate and everything there. There is a garage. And there is a sort of yardish area there. But that's it in terms of where you could park realistically.
Can I ask a question? Is it going to be an HMO, a house of multiple occupation?
I don't believe so. I mean, there would.
I mean, because
There's nothing in there to suggest it. I think it is simply going to be
wouldn't it?
a pretty magnificent
Private house.
private dwelling. So you see, we've got kitchen 2 here, kitchen, kind of main kitchen there, but it was described as a dining hall, a garden room, a living room there, a utility room here, stairs and hall over here, and then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bedrooms. Then we've got 7th bedroom, and the study and the games room. So it's an enormous property. I'm familiar with Lawn House, because a friend of mine used to own it 10 years ago. So I've been in it. And looking at it in terms of what's proposed, I would say that it's probably one where we're likely to say no objection subject to any contrary view of the Conservation Officer in terms of the actual works. But my concern is simply, with a house of that size, would there be adequate on-site parking? But there's that number of rooms anyway. I mean, you can't kind of shed the rooms, they're there. So it's in a sense, the parking issue might not be a bit of a red herring.
That's why I was asking the question.
About the house.
Because if it was, that would make a huge difference.
Well, they'd have to get a licence for that, wouldn't they? They'd have to get special permission.
So that would come up.
And so I think that issue would then become very much a live issue. Because
But
of course,
otherwise, I
if
can't.
it's basically a household, 3 cars, supposedly pinch 4, but it's, you know, would probably take that. They'd have the juggling of cars around, and unfortunately, all you'd see there from the frontage is not the rather nice property, but all the parked cars. But I'm not really sure that there's a lot to worry about in terms of the specifics of this application. And being somewhat familiar with what I might call the Mark Ben's approach to properties in Elmthorpe, I think that he's conscious of the need to kind of protect and preserve where possible and so on.
Isn't there a gate into the car park in the back of that house?
There is.
There is, yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. Because there used to be a big tree in that garden, didn't there? Massive tree just sit.
Yeah.
In the middle of the garden.
Yes, there is a right of way
Because there's a
out
gate
of the
here.
rear garden and into our.
But not a driving.
But not a driving one.
But there is a gate to enter that property, isn't there, already? Isn't there a gate from the driveways? You can get off the road.
The only concern would be, in my view, vehicles carrying out the works blocking Jericho, because it's such a very cramped road already.
One of the things I suppose that we could add as a kind of rider, and I know they're more common we've looked at them for the Costock Road, St Peter's Road development, and we looked at them for the St Christopher's Drive development, where they have these management plans.
Yeah, I think.
Which limit the working hours and noise and disruption. And it's not a bad point. There's a property in East Road that's being renovated big time at the
Yes,
moment.
well, that's,
And that was always one of our concerns about that. It's only been back by a former councillor. And I think they're trying to manage that, bearing in mind it's East Road, and that's not the easiest road to station a large vehicle. So that might be a worthwhile sort of observation.
because
perhaps some
Jericho's
form of
only a single track road, it's
management,
it's not a two-lane road.
would be needed, and perhaps insofar as any vehicles are used in connection with undertaking works, perhaps they shouldn't be coming into Jericho and shouldn't be coming to the property. But quite where you put them, because what they're going to do, park in the long stay car park and load their tools halfway across town. The reality is, they'll park it in the St Oaks Lane car park with its 2-hour limit, and ignore the 2-hour limit, walking through the
Yeah, but they wouldn't be able to see
way back.
vehicles.
No, they couldn't take the actual vehicle in, but they could park their vehicle in our car park, I suspect. They shouldn't, but they perhaps could.
There's a shed behind, there's a building. Behind that gate, the doorway into the car park, there's a building.
Yes, but you could come out through. Well, I don't know, you can walk through that actually.
Well, you could, I don't know.
Anyway, perhaps we're getting slightly sidetracked. So there you go. Incidentally, they're going to re-render various bits of the nice non-based render as opposed to the current single render. So do we say anything about, well, do we object first of all? If we don't object, do we want to make any observations about the on-site parking?
Yeah, I think Val's point is really good.
Yes.
It's really,
So some form of construction management
Yeah.
plan, so as to prevent difficulties for other residents and business users in the vicinity of the property.
I think it looks a bit clumsy, if I'm honest, the bits tagged on the side. The flat roof bit, I think it looks clumsy, just looks like it's just plonked there, and I just think it spoils the aesthetic to the building. And also, they're putting a balcony in as well, aren't they? Now, it's that Juliet balcony, which they'll be allowed to do under permitted development, I think, but not necessarily under. If it's a balcony you can sit out on, that's totally different. It's different.
Yes, there's certainly talk of a French window onto a flat roof within paperwork. Of course, bearing in mind that part of this property is listed,
Well, that's my point.
it may well be that
It looks kind of, if you look at the south elevation,
the conservation officer may very well get exercised by something.
if you look at the south elevation one, Lisa,
You can't, it's
Sorry.
not a property that you can walk round to the back of, you know, you don't see it, do you? I suppose you might have a glimpse from East Road,
Pretty difficult to see, I think.
it's sort of right down
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
it's the proposed floor, in other words, proposed floor plan.
What was the number again?
Sorry, 1671. That's the full application.
So if you look at the floor plan proposed, the middle drawing of that at the top. I just think that looks really clumsy. The top, sorry, top drawing, middle. You can break
You mean
blow
that?
that up, yes. And then obviously if you link to the one next to it, so that's it. So that middle drawing, I just think that's really clumsy on that lovely building. And when you think it's actually a single story at the moment, and if you go across to the right, it shows the balcony, which that says to me, you know, that's a substantive balcony. You're going to have the opportunity to sit down on. I don't know what that overlooks.
Yes, yeah.
In fact, what we there you go. It's got the, there's a guy on there, it says the balcony. Heritage style metal balustrade, 2 new stone coping. Yeah, that's the balcony. So I just think that looks all a bit clumsy. Just you know, on that lovely building. Again, it's conservation officers. Is it conservation area? Yes.
It's in the
Listen to
conservation area
listen to
and
it.
listed.
Let's hope that they have offset.
I think I'm getting a flavour of various concerns. Looks like I'm going to maybe have to put something together on this one for you as well, Lisa. Yeah. Right. You'll be relieved to hear the next one is nice and simple. It's trees. 17 North Street. It's a willow. And the application is to repollard it back to previous pollard points. The only interesting thing about the application in consent is that the reason for doing it is said to be because there's a lack of light in the garden and the trees become too large for its position. My suggestion would simply be, because it is on the face of it, tree husbandry, to say no objection, subject, in this case, to any contrary view of the tree officer.
Yeah.
So that if he was to take the view that this work was unnecessary and inappropriate, he could say so.
Yeah.
Because just because it's limiting the light might not be a good reason for doing it, but
Might be nice.
looks as if it's probably just taking it back to a position it was before. It was doing in that way for a reason. So I suspect that's the best approach.
Yeah.
So I'll just put that leaves one other matter, but it's really a matter almost for mention. Well, I say one of the matter in terms of planning applications. The zebra crossing in St O's Lane. We've simply been formally advised of it, but of course, this came before full council very recently, and full council seemed to be supportive of it. It's not on the portal, as far as I could see, so we can't actually see anything specifically about it. But as the council seemed to have been in favour of it, I think we just note it and end up really. If anybody's got any strong views that we should be
Anything's going to aid safety in the road.
looking at it, yes. I'm assuming it will aid rather than inhibit safety. We worry slightly about locations of zebra crossings particularly. Perhaps this might be a slightly tricky one, but they should know what they're doing. In terms of the rest of the agenda, clearly we've got a series of planning outcomes. So nothing very much to draw your attention to. That leaves us with one substantive matter on the agenda and then one issue. The substantive matter is simply this, the OTC planning guidance documents. Councillors will recall that we talked about this at the last meeting. We had our main guidance document, which was done in 2019, and I pointed out that it did things like refer to the draft major plan and such like. I went through it, I produced a new version, I've sent it round to everybody. It's tidied it up, but there are one or two extra bits in there. So we've taken some things out, and I've added one or two bits in. Some of which I don't think are particularly controversial, such as applications to develop land in a way which would lead to coalescence between Oundle and any neighbouring parish or parishes will ordinarily be opposed. That's been pretty much our policy throughout. And I did say that if there's to be any residential development of the land off Herne Road between Beaumont House and the A605, consideration should be given to the construction of another access from to the A605 and the bypass, which actually just spells out in a little bit more detail something we previously said. And of course it may be relevant because we're well aware that former Councillor Rose, who owns that land, has been looking at the possibility of trying to get it developed, and I'm sure that sooner or later we will get a planning application for a significant number of houses down there. I trust you've all kind of looked at it. Anybody want any further changes to it? Or alterations to things that I've tweaked, of which there are very few. The only other thing might be whether that list of community infrastructure requirements, as it now is, in any way needs altering or adding to. Which, to remind you, were improvements to the flow of pedestrians and vehicular traffic in the town centre, improvements to and expansion of car parking provision both in the town centre and outside it, construction of trails, walkways and cycleways around the town to provide for the well-being of residents, to develop opportunities for tourism, the expansion of the cemetery and allotment provision within the town, provision of a large community space suitable for use as a festival site, and the provision of new or enhanced facilities for sport and recreation. They've been there for some time. I couldn't think of anything particularly to add to it. I didn't think there was anything there we wanted to take away from it, so I left it as is. Are we happy with that document? If we are fine, we'll use that in future. If the old one's on the website, we should replace it with the new one. If none of this stuff is on the website, maybe it all should be, in the interests of being open. Those are the documents that we will ordinarily refer to. They're not binding upon us, but they do just help us concentrate our minds a little bit. And that leaves us, we nearly managed it, Councillor Chesson, with only any other relevant matters for report. The only thing was, it only struck me afterwards. At the last meeting, we talked about this possibility of some kind of a subcommittee, and then it was discussed in full council and kind of pinged back to us to get on with it. We hadn't specifically put it on our agenda.
No.
So I don't propose to discuss it other than to say, can we put the issue of formation of subcommittee?
Yeah, it was sort of our specialist, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Sort of ask people if
It's approaching people like Mark Benz, like Tony Hoyle, who's our footpaths person, and so on.
And there are a number of planners that work for other, as in planning officers that work for other areas. that could bring a voice as they live in town.
Potentially so. So I think what we'll do is we'll put it on the agenda next time. We might try and draw up a kind of list of people that we might feel like approaching.
It's for those contentious planning applications, or the ones that we know we might want to give a more thorough view.
Yes, I
that sort of
mean,
thing.
I've mentioned one site where I think we might see an application.
There's just, from a layman's point of view, I guess, does anyone here know any architects? Because I think that would actually be really
Yeah.
useful.
Mark Bennett.
Mark
It's
Bennett.
not very.
Okay.
David
Who
Smith,
sat
David
on-
Smith, Emma,
And the
Tansy.
zoning plan,
There's a number we know that live in or around town.
Okay.
Either live in town or work in
So I
town.
think the idea was that we'd draw up some sort of terms of reference as to who we would call on, so that actually,
Yeah.
you would get, you'd probably have a list of people, you'd say, well, actually, let's ask that one on this particular case.
So the next committee meeting plan is to draw up some terms of reference for this and to think of people that we might want to approach to see if they're interested in joining it on the basis of whatever it is we've drawn up.
Yeah.
The only thing is, if it turns out to be an incredibly heavy meeting, which I think it won't be, because with it being right after the Christmas break, I suspect we might have a lighter agenda than, say, tonight. It might be a good opportunity to talk about it anyway. So, with that one out of the way, Councillor Chester, do you have anything else? Councillor Davis?
Whilst we were looking through, that was passed, by the way, the plan application for Charmin Quinney. It was 01741 in 2018, and basically they had individual letters that were welded to a slim backing plate, and where possible they drilled into existing holes from what was already on
Now
there.
that's
Oh,
very
it's
interesting.
existing.
And we deferred it to the conservation officer.
That's very interesting, isn't it? Because their way of doing it is different
Yeah,
to what Fine and Country are suggesting.
yes.
So in fact, I think what we should do is we should say that in line with that one, so if you want to make a note of the number, which I think was EN 18 01741,
LBC, I've got, which I don't know what that means, but.
This
This is building consent.
Oh, there
Which of course is the other point, because they haven't applied for this building consent, and clearly they should have done.
yeah, spin backing plate.
I think they should, more
So,
or less.
yeah, so they should put in a new listed building consent, and it should be done in the same way
Yeah,
as the Sharp and Quinney one was done.
absolutely, and then we know we're sort of all
And
the,
then,
take cognizance of the.
yes,
side.
they will only be happy. Thank you for that, very helpful.
Nothing.
Lisa, is there anything else that you have?
Emma just asked me to mention about the
Awesome.
cemetery extension. The developer
Yes,
has asked to meet with you
you
and
did.
Emma.
Sorry, I was supposed to mention that. I knew if I didn't print that email off, I'd forget all about it. So thank you for reminding me. Lisa. Yes, I think
Just
it's
say if you
David
could drop
Wilson
us some
Homes, isn't
dates,
it?
yeah.
Who are behind the Stoke Doyle development, want to talk to us about the cemetery extension. And it struck me that the logic would be that it should be the mayor, the clerk, probably myself, and probably the chair of estates. I know Councillor Clark was a little worried. He's getting ever so paranoid about putting his head above the parapet on any planning applications. And I said, well, look, as far as I can see, I don't see why you can't have a view on planning applications as long as it's not the St Peter's Road, Cotterscott Road one, which directly affects your house. Why you would need to be worried about Stoke Doyle Road, for example, I cannot see.
But the chair of estates would.
But I might, well, I back on, I know this, no secret, I back onto that piece of land. My only view around meetings David Wilson Homes is, they don't actually own the bit of land yet. So it probably should be.
Probably optioned it.
Yeah, they optioned it, but the point is that actually should we not, like I said before, should we be speaking to the Fifis who actually own the land, or they should be party to it as well.
Mm.
because
Well, we can always, we can approach David Wilson Homes and raise that issue with them. I mean, they might want to meet during the day, which will prove problematic for some of us. But I think in principle, we should engage with them.
Absolutely, oh no, definitely, because again, it's.
If
the
it
wish of
ends up as the
council.
only person who can do it is the clerk, well, so be it.
And
It'd be nice if somebody could do it, but of course, yes,
And we
I
know,
haven't thought about.
yeah, we do know we've been saying as a council, we want an extension to the cemetery. It's how that happens.
Yes,
Uh,
it
just
might be
like-
that actually if anybody absented himself from that, maybe.
Probably me.
we could say that. I didn't-
I'll
Think
send
that
Liz,
one through,
I'll send
so-
Liz, because she likes standing in for me, so that's fine, I'll ask Liz.
Oh, that's fine,
So I can send representatives,
okay.
can't Lisa.
Well, we might ought to have the Feffits, because they're the ones who
They own the
Well,
actually
yes.
want us to have the land, or, you know, that's always.
Well, we'll
been
simply
the case.
ask David Wilson, will somebody from the VFEs be there
Mm.
as well? Because we think it would be nice if they were.
Because they want to send us a redesign of the plan, don't they? They're going to resubmit their application for what I gather.
It seems to be about half of the course, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Everybody seems to have been second bites at the Sharon. Perhaps because of our criticism. Councillor
Excuse me.
Chester wants me to excuse her, but actually, it seems to me,
That's
we
it.
might as well say the meeting is now finished. Councillor Chester,
Thank you,
may now
Chair.
leave without having to leave early.